About 6 months ago, I uploaded this video where I addressed one of the most frequently asked questions I get, which surprisingly is what to spend your Skyblock coins on. As a player who has essentially completed the majority of Skyblock's progression and has almost everything they could ask for, I feel like I have learned a lot about this game as a whole, especially more now than I did 6 months ago. As I'm sure a lot of you guys aren't even close to reaching this stage of the game, I figured it'd be better if I passed on my knowledge to help new and emerging players, as spending money can be really difficult, mainly because this game has so many cool items. So, with all that aside, let's get straight into the video. Alrighty, so as you can see in today's video, I'm going to be covering what you can spend your money on, so that way if there are any newer players who are sort of getting into Hypixel Skyblock at this day and age, you should have a pretty decent understanding of some things you can go for with all your money that you will earn, and items that you should work towards, as it seems like a lot of people struggle to decide on what to get. But before this video does start, I do have a very big disclaimer to get out of the way before I get into any of the nitty-gritty details regarding on what you should spend money on. I just want to make it very clear that my word is not final. Just because I tell you that one item is better than another, or you should be going for one thing over something else, does not mean that you should follow this word for word. I'm really just sharing my experiences as a player because I've been playing this game for almost 2 years now, and I have got a net worth of 3 billion coins. So I'd like to think that I have a fairly good understanding of this game and that I will be able to share with a lot of you guys. For the longest time, I have been a very big advocate for doing your own research, making your own decisions, and not letting anybody boss you around with things that you should be buying. As I feel like a lot of YouTubers love to manipulate markets and tell all their audiences what to get as if it's the only thing that they're supposed to be buying, when in reality, this game just has so much stuff that you can do. Just have fun with it and do what you think is best to suit you as a player. But with that being said, the first thing that I want to cover in today's video is that dungeons is something that you should almost never get into, at least for the vast majority of people that I have talked to who tend to watch my videos. From my experience, a lot of my viewers and a lot of people that I have been in contact with are generally around the early to mid-game stages and sometimes in the early late game. Now, the most common thing that I see a lot of people doing is they go out and they get themselves carries from floors 1 to 6, so that way they can use a Livid Dagger, a Flower of Truth, Shadow Assassin armor, or even Necrolord armor. Now, while this isn't a necessarily bad option, for me personally, I would never recommend anybody do this unless you are under a very specific circumstance. I will get into what that is a little bit later in the video, but what I'm trying to say is that dungeons does require a lot more than just gear, because your skills, your pets, everything else that you have matters so much more than whether or not you have the money for a Livid Dagger or whether or not you have the money to get carries up until floor 6. So what would I suggest that you buy instead of getting your carries all the way up until floor 6? Well, me personally, I would recommend you level up your skills a lot. I'm just going to pull up my skills here for a bit of a reference, even though I am a more maxed out player here. But as you can see, I am Catacombs 31. Now that is really high, and the only reason that I've actually been able to achieve such a high number of Catacombs level is because I have leveled up everything else over here as well. Skills like enchanting and alchemy are very easy to level up and usually just require you to have a lot of money to spend or a little bit of time every day to do your experimentation table. And then of course you have skills like combat, farming, foraging, mining, and fishing, which all buff different things that are just as important. Farming, fishing, and mining will all help you get much higher EHP, which means your health and your defense is going to be boosted significantly the higher that you do level these 3 skills up. While combat and foraging will focus your damage a significantly higher amount, which means that you should be going for all of these equally and trying to level them up as much as possible, because that way you're going to be able to do a lot more damage, and this is what is going to help you be a better dungeons player rather than 4, 5, and 6 carries. So to link this back with spending money in this game, I would suggest that you spend a fair bit of money on alchemy skill, get your alchemy skill up, and also make sure you get your enchanting skill up in the meantime, because that's going to give you a lot of intelligence, and intelligence is always a very nice asset to have. But when it comes to combat, farming, and all of those other skills, invest in a tree capitator so you can forage a lot more efficiently, and also invest in a builder's one so you can build some farms and get your farming skill up in the meantime, and also put away some money to do some revs for combat XP or any other method of combat XP that works for you. Grinding ghosts in the mist is a very good option, but is a lot harder for most people, so as a general rule of thumb, I would always recommend the Revenant Horror boss, as that is a very easy way to do it. So just to sum all of that up very quickly here, do not focus on floor 5 and 6 carries. Don't focus on going into dungeons until you have really good skills beforehand. And set aside a fair bit of money, definitely in the tens of millions, to level up these skills, as that's going to benefit you a lot more in the long run. Now, the next thing that a lot more people should be focusing than what I actually tend to see should be your minion slots. So as you can see, I have this full-on 29 lapis minion setup here. Now, as a more endgame player, I've got all tier 12s, and most of these minions do have plasma buckets, like the ones over here. I've got a lot of plasma buckets, the super compactors, and the diamond spreadings. Now, depending on what stage of the game you're at, you will not have any of this very expensive gear, and I wouldn't expect you to either. However, you should always be working towards this, as having a very good minion setup is just the ultimate way to earn passive income. I pretty much don't grind money anymore because I've just sort of been chilling out and doing my own thing with this game. So minions are my only source of income currently, and from experience, I could definitely recommend you to set aside a lot of your income to leveling up your minions. This includes the very basic minion upgrades, your enchanted lava buckets, super compactors, diamond spreadings, medium storages, whatever the case may be, but it also involves your minion slots. You should be always trying to upgrade your minion slots as much as possible. And as a newer player, I would highly suggest you go for 20 minion slots as quick as you can. You can do this via the community hall, or you can do it via the collections. But once you reach around 20 to 25 minion slots, you can obviously slow down a little bit. It will cost you a lot more money to go from that 25 to 29 minion slot mark, but it's always good to spend maybe a couple million coins every week just to get a couple of more minions to tier 11, tier 10, whatever the case may be, because eventually in the long run it will really help you out. Minions have an incredible potential in this game with passive income, and there is a reason why I've made so many videos on minions to really help you guys out with that. So now that I've covered what I would consider the most important upgrades and things you can really spend your money on inside of Hypixel Skyblock, I want to talk about the things that a lot of people always ask me about, especially items like the Flower of Truth or Shadow Assassin armor, a baby Yeti, all kinds of gear like that. I constantly get this asked over on my Twitch streams. So I'm just going to answer that in today's video with things that I would recommend you buy instead of these items, or whether these items are actually worth it. So gear in Hypixel Skyblock is obviously important. Now, if you look at me, for example, I've got full 3/4 Necron. I've maxed it out, completely decked it out with recoms, growth 6, prot 6, and I have a 5-star tarantula helmet as well. However, as a lot of you may know, you probably don't have the money to afford this, and I wouldn't expect you to either way. So then in that case, what gear would you get, and what should you spend your money on in this case? So I'm going to address the weapon situation to start things off. Not everybody is going to have a Scylla or a Hyperion. I have got a Hyperion in my ender chest as well. So a lot of you guys will probably think to go ahead and buy yourselves a livid dagger instead, like the one that I have showcased right here. However, I would never recommend this. In fact, a very great alternative to all the weapons that a lot of people talk about is the warped AOTE. The warped AOTE is around 10 million coins, I want to say. At least that's the last time I checked, that was the price of it. And the warped AOTE has no requirements. It does not need any carries whatsoever, but it is a dungeon sword and it does a lot of damage, especially for a mid-game weapon. And because it is an AOTE, you can also save 2 slots by converting them into 1 slot where you can teleport and you can do melee damage with just 1 weapon. Now you guys may be thinking, well, the warped AOTE doesn't give you the strength of the Flower of Truth, which means you can't use it with the baby Yeti. You also can't get the extra attack damage that the livid dagger does give you. And to that I say, you don't need it. You don't need to have that insane capability with the other weapons that you could be buying instead, because those not only require carries, but they're also very expensive. And while the warped AOTE is also a pretty expensive weapon, you can cheap out with a lot of other things when you do purchase it. And if you buy a warped AOTE, it pretty much sets you up for a lot of the mid-game and close to the early late game as well. So rather than spending a lot of money on buying a livid and a Flower of Truth, you can go ahead and buy yourself just a single warped AOTE, and then go out and spend the rest of the money that you might have on your minion slots, on your skills, and other things that are more important. The other really common question that a lot of people do have is, should I buy 3/4 Shadow Assassin or just the armors in general? Now to that, I would also say no, you don't need it, it's not that necessary. While you can get really well set up by purchasing Shadow Assassin very early on, it is a good option, although I wouldn't really say it's the best option. There are cheaper alternatives like a full Tarantula armor set or 3/4 strong with the Tarantula helmet, and I did make a video on the Tarantula armor if you would like some details on that as to why it's so good. So if I were you, I would recommend those two armor sets, although you could go ahead and get a floor 5 carry to use 3/4 Shadow Assassin. But if you are really low in Catacombs level, you won't even be able to use a Zombie Knight chestplate or even a Zombie Soldier chestplate. So the chestplate you're going to have to use is going to be very complicated, and it just gets very difficult to use that armor in general. So ultimately, stick with the non-dungeon stuff. I can't stress this enough. Dungeon stuff shouldn't be touched if you're not going to be doing dungeons. So I wouldn't really worry about those things early on. Now, another very important thing that a lot of people should definitely spend more money on is pets. Now, if you look at my pets GUI, for example, I have a lot of pets, as you can see. I've got a couple that have skins, that's no big deal, that's just what I've decided to spend some gems on. But ultimately, I have a lot of pets here, and the reason for that is mainly for the pet score here. As you can see, depending on how much pet score you have, it determines how much bonus magic find you get, and this is only achieved by getting different legendary, epic, rare, uncommon, or common pets. So for me, every single legendary pet that I have in here gives me +5 pet score, and I do have a couple of epic ones just at the bottom of my list here. So overall, I have a score of 204, but most people don't even reach that score of 25. So what am I trying to say here? Well, what I'm trying to say is that you should definitely go out and buy more pets than what you probably already have. I feel like a lot of people, especially mid-game, early game, and just people who are lower level in general, tend to have just like an Enderman pet, which is a rare one that they picked up in the end farming Enderman one time. Or maybe they have an uncommon rabbit pet or something ridiculous like that, and they just have 0 pet score, 0 pet functionality, and they don't have any versatility when it comes to pets in general. Pets are some of the most important assets to this entire game, and they provide a lot of different benefits that you should definitely be trying to get your hands on. As a general rule of thumb, I always recommend that you get 1 combat pet and at least 1 XP boosting pet. So if I look at my pets menu once again, a good example of a combat pet would be something like a Wither Skeleton, because Wither Skeletons are really cheap to buy. They're also very easy to level up with snow minions, and they just do incredible damage for their price. And then for XP boosting pets, this can be anything from a rabbit pet to a silverfish pet, or even an ocelot pet as well, as these all boost different XPs. And then when it comes to pet score, you're better off going ahead and getting very cheap pets. You can go for a level 1 legendary pig pet. These are very easy to get your hands on. The Jerry pet is also a very cheap one to get. Obviously not the mythic variant, this one's a little bit more expensive, but the legendary one is super easy to get your hands on. And the horse pet is also another great example of really cheap legendary pets you can get your hands on, and that will automatically put you above that 10 pet score for the extra magic find, and slowly but surely you can work your way up and get more and more pets to get more pet score, which in turn results in more magic find, and you just overall boost your stats even higher. So overall, pets are an amazing thing to spend your money on. I highly recommend you go ahead and do so because they're just so valuable and so underrated from many early game players. But moving on to the final thing that I have for the end of the video, and I've saved it for last for these special people who have made it to the very end here, but the most important thing, the one that pretty much trumps everything else in this game that you can be spending your money on, is quite literally nothing. Now you might think I'm actually trolling here, when in reality, I'm not. Have a look at my purse over on the right. As you can see, I have 161 million coins. Now that is ridiculous. A lot of people will see my purse and go, OMG, why do you have so much money? Please give me some money. You don't need any of that. And while that is true, I don't need all this money. I do need it as well. One thing that is very important to this game that also applies to real life surprisingly is to develop really good spending habits and learning to manage your money wisely. Something that a lot of players don't actually do, which I always recommend everybody does, is to keep 15 million coins or at least 15 million coins in your main bank account to get the maximum interest possible. And if you're on a co-op, put 5 million in your personal bank account, because that way you're going to be getting interest in this one as well. But unless you desperately need some upgrade or you really need to get your hands on something, why would you go out and spend your money? Like I've said time and time again, I'm not trying to flex my net worth to show you guys how much money I have, but linking back to the fact that I am an endgame player that has pretty much got everything that I need, there is no reason for me to be spending my money right now. The best thing that I can do is get used to having a high amount of money, because once you get used to having lots of money and you know how to spend your money better, you'll be making smarter investment options on what you spend your money on. You'll learn how to flip better, you'll learn how to make good investments to earn back your money, and overall you'll get so good at managing it that you won't have to be putting in as much effort to be earning money with all the money making methods that people try to give you. So ultimately, in my opinion, one of the best things you can actually do in this game when it comes to spending money is just to save it. And on that note, that's pretty much going to wrap up everything that I had for today's video. Hopefully you guys did find this enjoyable or informative in some way. Please do leave a like, as it helps out tremendously and pushes this video out to a lot of other people who may need it as well. And if you do have any further questions about anything that I did talk about in this video, you can always ask me when I'm live over on Twitch. I do stream every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The links are down in the description below. But with all that out of the way, that's going to be it for me today, guys. And as always, take care and peace. So, I see myself playing on Mineplex more anyways, and you know. No way! No way! No way! No way!